Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a ZOR, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Hey listeners, you are in for an action-filled, fun podcast with Jeff Duden. He was the founder of AdvantaClean, sold that for a pile of money, started a family office, which I get into what a family office is. We talk about what he's doing today, and we just gave a lot of helpful, actionable advice to franchisees, emerging franchisors, existing franchisors, and franchise buyers. We talk about risk. Like I asked him, what is the risk involved with retail versus service, et cetera? So we went into that. And I think that is something that a lot of franchisors don't really want to talk about in the sales process. We absolutely went there. We talked about territories, like why so many franchisors might have too many territories right now. What's the right size? We talked about just some of the big lessons that he's learned as a franchisor, now having a family of brands and what he's doing with that. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode with Jeff Duden. All right, Jeff, second time on the podcast. It's always good having you on. And just when I run into you randomly at places, just learning from you. You're one of these guys that's just a wealth of information, the giver of information, just like a mentor to a lot of people in franchising. So good to have you back on.
Erik, excited to be here. And if I wander into you, that must mean I'm looking at something out in South Dakota at the end of some road. I must be on an elk hunt or something.
When I see elk out my front door, I'll keep a lookout for some out-of-town plates ripping up the dirt road. So
just duck.
Well, we got all kinds of things that I want to get into. Why don't you give the listeners a little bit of your background for context? Because I want to talk about lessons, like things that you've learned over the years and how you're applying that to things today, and what franchisees and franchisors can learn from you today. So background.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that your listener group is people that are very interested in franchising already, and young franchisors, franchisees, and so I'm excited. Any questions that pop up that would help these people is obviously what I'm looking to do. I mean, I exist to serve by encouraging entrepreneurs and really encouraging people to take action and take control of their life and to make a difference. And then, I also believe that entrepreneurship is really important for this country, and it's strengthening the middle class. Nobody likes to say what class they're in. We're not in a class system here, but I mean, ultimately, anybody that wants to go from where they are to a different or a better place, franchising is a great way to scratch that entrepreneurial itch. And so we believe that we're doing good work. We believe we're doing important work. Small businesses is incredibly important to the foundation of the country, and franchising is really one of the genius wealth creation models that have ever been created. And so we're excited about it. And anytime I can get in a room with you, people like you, and people like listen to you, and that you're engaged with, is great for me. So my background is I am a Chicago guy that came out on a football scholarship, third college. So I had to find a way to make it work. The first one was, I probably didn't give my best effort. So I had to drop back to a junior college in Chicago, which was a great experience for me. It's one of those football factory type situations. And I was fortunate enough to kind of focus and do well and get a scholarship out to Appalachian State. So I went from the hard scrabble concrete Chicago out to the top of a green mountain with was a dry county at the time, so we had to drive the county over to get a cold beer. And
when you were 21, of course, right?
Yeah, well, it's probably 24 by then, because no, but yeah, right. So when you're 21, and so anyway, but I showed up there, and I really, I had worked the trades growing up, moving, concrete, all the things that you do, and I needed money, because although I was on a scholarship, I had to live over the summer, so I started the painting business. And we ultimately won the contracts to do the student housing apartment lease changes. And so we would put together a team of all the athletes that were there over the summer, and basketball players would cut in the ceilings, and the wrestlers would cut in the baseboards, and the football players were on this huge roller that we had built in the shop there. And so that was great. And really it was an early entrepreneurial experience for me, such as I didn't even look for a job when I got out of college. And a buddy called me and said, hey, this hurricane just hit South Florida. And we took my partner and I took our little 4-cylinder truck down to South Florida with the wooden pressure treated ladder rack that we had built on it. And we came back 3 years later and had cut our teeth in the restoration industry and started a business that would one day become AdvantaClean. So that was 92. We went down 94, started AdvantaClean up in Central Florida. In 95, I came back up here to the Carolinas to get married and to open our second location. So we grew that into a sizable business over the next 10 years, responding to disasters. We had offices in Florida and both of the Carolinas at the time. And then in 2004, I had bought my last partner out, and I hired my first consultants. And it was the first time I ever heard the words purpose and vision and mission. And we ever wrote a vision for the company, and we ever put some values down on paper. And, really there was a couple of, I look back, first, I look at my high school basketball coaches. These guys were ahead of their time, and they would make us put goal cards up in our lockers and visualize. We practiced free throws by laying on our back in a dark room. And, it's like, wow, these guys are odd, but when I look back on it, the things that I learned, how to set goals, how to identify gaps, how to build a team, and how to get people on the same page so everybody's pulling on the oars in the same direction. I mean, I started to learn those things through athletics in high school. And then, and then in 2004, when we hired these consultants, it was an epiphany for me about how to think about business and how to be intentional. So the next thing we had built an entire fleet out of generators and air conditioners on semis and campers and all that. And as if we had ordered it up, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. So we went down there and we set up what would be a 5-year storm response, doing government contracting and big buildings and big projects. But I was on my way back, and I was driving through Atlanta, and I had 3 children at the time, 7, 4, and 1. What I realized, I was missing my son's first football season. And, for me, and I know that Erik, I believe, we've never talked about it, but I believe that you prioritize your family based on the decisions that you've made in your life. And everybody has to decide what matters most for them. As a matter of fact, that's the best question to ask yourself when you wake up every morning is, what matters the most? Because everything else is just, first things first and second things never. And you always have to keep in front of you a North Star that says, this is what I stand for, and this is the change that I want to make, and this is how I'm going to go about it. So I was driving back, and I realized, I said, man, we're very successful. We're growing. I just been on the road for 3 months, and I said, this is inconsistent with who I want to be. I decided in that moment that I was going to continue the franchising path and pursue it. So I did, and because your true values are what you tolerate, and I was not willing to tolerate the same circumstances in my family that I was creating in the family that I grew up in, which led me to 3 colleges and bad grades and a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, so in 2006, 7, and 8, we sold all of our company stores under a franchise model. In 2009, we launched to the marketplace. And then I saw a Facebook post pop up in 2013. We already had 130 territories operating, and we ended up in 2009 with about 240 territories operating. It was about 160 unique owner groups in 37 states. And And we sold the business to Homefront Franchise Concepts out of Irvine, California, 24 years and 11 months after I started it. So that's how I learned franchising, painfully over a long time. And so I got out of that, and I tried to figure out what to do next. I had met, I had helped a guy with a fitness concept called Burn Boot Camp, and so I knew a little bit about that. And some guys had approached me locally with this rock box concept, so I joined them as a partner, and we've grown that business to about 150 sold, and we'll have 60 open here at the end of this year over about 3 years. And really, my brother, who had come out from Chicago, same junior college, and taken over the painting business, put himself through college. Well, he became the CFO of the Carolina Panthers for 16 years. So he led the sale from the Richardson family to the Tepper Group, the $2.4 billion transaction there. And then from there, I said, hey man, why don't we get back together and put a family office together and decide what we're going to do. So that's what we did. And so we've been making investments in franchise businesses and doing some consulting with emerging brands, and doing some consulting and working with some service companies, FSOs and things like that, just really all around the franchise space. We do non-correlated investing as well. But, my passion, I identify as a franchisor, man. My passion is coaching and teaching, and franchising is perfect for me. It just works with my personality and what I like to see, and the impact that I think you can make. While I was building AdvantaClean, and I coached over 30 years of my kids' youth sports, and I really looked at it, and I used those lessons of communicating a plan, building a team. I think it goes hand in hand when you got a bunch of 12-year-olds and you got 4 months to try to win a championship, or you've got a franchise that needs to put together a team of 5 or 10 people to win in their marketplace. Man, it's all about communication and alignment and winning, and letting people know where they stand so they can choose whether they want to be with you or not. So that's what we've done. And then as we kind of stabilized and we were knocking around, I said, I really think that as I got far away from AdvantaClean a couple of years, we said, we really have a competency in property services. So we've stood up Homefront Brands, and we've acquired 6 businesses into that platform over the last 8 months. And it's going extremely well. We got a bunch of talented people around it. We have incredible founders that have incredible stories, and they're just like we were back in the day, in the beginning. So so that's what I'm up to right now, and we're really excited about Homefront Brands, and we're looking to continue to find the right partners to work with, and that are creative to the platform.
So I think we're going to have a fun conversation that's going to be valuable to franchise buyers. You're going to learn things. Franchisees being a part of emerging brands like the brands in Homefront Brands, and then franchisors that are like, we're going to have some fun conversations, very helpful conversations for the franchisors wanting to build a really good business. And maybe you are going to go at this all alone, which a lot of them do, or you partner with someone that has a ton of experience, because there's a number of groups out there that you're able to do that with. And so this is going to be very, very helpful. I've got so many different places I want to go. Let me try to summarize what your background. You, bad student, football player, got into the restoration business, and then you had some, I would call it bad luck with Katrina, good luck for you. And I want to understand like how you see that, how important that was in your trajectory of AdvantaClean, Katrina being able to service that area for 5 years. And then you build this big brand, AdvantaClean. You have a sizable exit. And for the listeners that don't understand what a family office is, it's a number of different ways family offices can work, but typically a family office is wealthy, very wealthy individuals have an office that manages a lot of the wealth and investments and things like that. So that's probably a term that most people should get familiar with. So when you hear someone talk about a family office, your ears should perk up and you think, wow, sizable exit, lots of things learned along the way, and you should learn from them. So that's what you've got going on now. And is that fairly accurate up to this point? Like, did I give a good, brief overview?
100%.
All right. So now I want to start with what's it like? There's a lot that can drive you, but you're not, when you started AdvantaClean into Katrina, and then you were hustling along the way, like what's different about building that versus building now with a sizable bank account and resources to be able to deploy? Like what's different?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Man, I had somebody, I was in a forum meeting this week, and somebody gave me the Harvard's definition of an entrepreneur. And I want to pull it up, and I don't want to look at my phone while I'm on this thing here.
Oh, take it down. That's fine. Look at your phone.
Yeah, it was actually great because
we're not too professional around here.
Oh man, thank goodness.
Yeah. So
thank goodness. Yeah, here, there it is. An entrepreneur is someone who seeks economic gain with no regard to the resources currently under control.
So are you still an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, so, to your point, I mean, it took 15 years from the time that I started thinking about franchising, and 10 years from the time that I actually went and got my first franchise attorney for us to get to market. And the challenge is that we had a great business going, and it wasn't so much that we didn't have the money, it's that we didn't have the time or the energy to allocate to it, because that business kept growing. And the other thing that I did that wasn't very smart was, I was very proud of the fact that we didn't have anybody with franchise experience in our building, and that we were figuring it all out. So in some ways, in that little bubble that we were working in, we came up with a call center concept that most people at the time were really afraid to do. And we had always run call center for our entire, multi-state operation. So it made sense that we just rolled our franchisees onto this call center. So in that way, I think if I would have asked, 9.5 out of 10 consultants would have said, no, don't do it. You're going to get sued and you drop calls and all this stuff. So, in some ways, and I think a good theme of my career and probably my last book will be Too Stupid to Fail. So, we just did it. And but on the other side, I probably could have cut off a decade if I would have just gone out and found the right people to help me and pour into me. Because what happened is as I started getting involved in franchising, I started participating in the industry and meeting people, and I had to go out like a squirrel and accumulate all the knowledge from over time, and with a lot of travel and a lot of conversations and a lot of phone calls and stuff. And I think inherently that was unnecessary, but to your point, you're like, well, what, how much do I allocate for this? How much do I allocate for that? How much do I spend ahead of revenue, which is a big deal for emerging brands? It's like, okay, because think about it, so usually the first 3 to 4 franchisees are going to be friends and family round, somebody somebody that's friendly. So when I sold my company stores under the franchise model, the biggest one I did was one of our referral partners that had a huge waterproofing business. I'm like, what would go good with your business? I still remember where I was when I called the guy. I said, what would go good with your business? My business. And in the first year, both companies went up 42% because,
Wow.
They were giving us work and we were giving them work. And I'm like, you should have this. And, my ulterior, I knew he was a quality individual that ran a tight business, and I knew we'd be safe there to be able to really work out the bugs of the franchise system. And then it was not dissimilar with our other offices. We found people that were qualified contractors, complimentary people, made them a good deal and got them into the business. So, but in the absence of that, you've got to have, a lot of people try to do it on a shoestring. So your first 3 or 4 are going to be people that and then your next 20 are really going to make the difference whether you live or die. Your first 20, how they feel about the opportunity, what your relationship equity is. Do they, did you deliver what was promised? Was the opportunity, were they, was the business so hard, or did you make it so hard for them that, they were exhausted? Being broke and tired is a horrible combination. And, or do they validate well? And your first 20, if you do a great job with them, you'll get the next 80, you'll get the next 100, you'll get the next 200, because you've set a foundation and you've set a precedent for what it means to be a good citizen and to run a solid business in whatever it is. So, but yeah, were we, it's not that we were under-resourced, but I think we were undereducated. We had a knowledge gap that we could have done a much better job filling. And, people like you, I check in on your thread. I mean, there's a lot of really, really good questions and good answers that pop across the things that you do. So that was a big difference. So the interesting thing about now is, then there was mistakes we made, maybe with our technology platform. I mean, we did a couple of technology migrations that could have been done better. There was things that we did, maybe decisions that I waffled on where I could have been a little bit stronger earlier, because I didn't, you let something go and then it continues to unravel. So, where we are right now is, I think we have a very strong understanding of where we are going, where we demand excellence from ourselves, so that we can provide excellence to our franchisees. And then we are not resource constrained in our ability to just, we just make a decision and the next week we've got it, or it's in process, or we've got an RFP out there. We don't have to say, is it the right decision? It's, what if it doesn't work? And then we've been able to attract top talent, because, platforms are a leverage, so if you think about it, franchisees get incredible leverage from a franchise system in technology, in brand awareness, in customer acquisition, in peer groups, in support, in all the ways that matter. I mean, a good franchise system is franchisee-centric. I mean, we're franchisee-centric organizations, and it's really about everything that they need and everything that they, and sometimes, telling them that they don't need things or they don't need to do things. But, and so there's leverage that gets created inside of a great franchise system. When you go to a platform, it's another layer of leverage. So, we get additional leverage in customer acquisition, additional leverage in technology and talent. I mean, the talent that we've been able to that sought us out and been able to join us over the last 6 months has really been incredible. And it makes it's not easy, but there's a level of certainty that we have around what we're doing, that we know is going to lead to, strong lifelong relationships with the people that join us.
Attention franchisors, if you are not bringing in many of the right franchisees, sales are slow. It's stealing too much of your time as a founder trying to award franchises to the right franchisee. There's a better way to do it. That's why I started the Franchise Sales Mentor. If you want to have access to the information, the techniques, the ways that the best franchise sales organizations are awarding franchisees, then you might want to check out the Franchise Sales Mentor. The reasons that franchisors join is because they want access. They want access to my Rolodex. They want access to my connections. They want access to shortcut both short-term and long-term success to increase enterprise value to their brand. You mentioned franchisee-centric, and a lot of brands think that they are, say that they are, but how does a franchisee know if they're in a franchisee-centric brand?
Well, that's a great question. How does a franchisee know if they're in a franchise-centric brand?
Because we all go through different stages. People as franchisees, they're, it's like, the whole stages of the franchisee. But I remember, just to frame it up a little bit, Jeff, when one of my first brands, I'm like, God, this is tough. And they're not being very nice here, helpful here, this, that, or the other. And then looking back after being a franchisee in a number of different brands, thinking, wow, they were really good in this area and that area. And then I've seen others that were like, they say they're really good, but they're really not. And they come across like they are, but they're really not. So, if a franchisee hasn't been a part of 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 different brands, they don't know what franchisee-centric might be. So how would they know?
So, I had an answer that popped into my head right away, but candidly, it felt a little squishy. But I'll ask you the question.
Wait a second. Wait a second. This is my show. Go for it. Go for it.
I have an answer, but what was the difference between the ones that felt franchisee centric to you and supporting and the ones that didn't? What was the difference? Was it the money?
Well, I think profitability is key. Like if a franchisee is not making money, like that's number one. But if you can trust that franchisor, if you can trust them that they're what they say is what they do, there's no back end funny business. If the founder, the CEO, the C-level executives, like, where they stand with things, you may like it or not like it, but where they stand. It's those types of things. And that kind of falls under trust. So that would be one of my answers.
Yeah. And I think that was where my head exactly went with it.
So you're saying my answer was squishy?
No, I was saying, I was framing it like empathy, like good leaders are available.
Yeah.
So leaders, if they want to be true leaders, they have to be available. So do they pick up the phone when you call? Do they go to the contract and just say, that's the way it is? Or do they, like if a franchisee is struggling, then, they really don't raise their hand and do a good self-diagnosis. Hey, I'm struggling because, I'm sales reluctant. I don't rush to conflict. And I rub my employees the wrong way. So all of these things are causing me friction in my margin and the ability to keep people and all. Like, they don't just come out and honestly self-diagnose. So you have to be available, and you've got to, like, because there's always a right way, an optimal way to run any business. And the biggest variation in franchising is the franchisee, and they're generally 90+% are very well intentioned and trying very hard and want to do well. And your top 20% are, their blueprint matched with the offering. The skills that they're comfortable with are the skills that are required for that business, and they just take off, and it seems easy for them. Maybe they do the people piece well. They don't have any sales reluctance. They crush sales, and they resolve conflicts in a healthy manner. And they have the law of attraction says people want to be with them. They speak well. They do what they say. It's easy for them, right? And if you can do all those things, it really, I don't care if it's an Applebee's or AdvantaClean. I mean, those skills are going to take you a long way. Other people with different blueprints and different profiles, are going to need work in certain areas, and some of those areas might slow the growth of their business. So how do you get in the pocket? That's a boxing term. Like, you got to be willing to get in the pocket with these people. And, that's where servant leadership is such a powerful concept in franchising, is that, you have to be willing to get close enough to people to understand what they truly need individually, not as, what do they need, not necessarily what they're screaming that they want because they're in pain. Community people, when people are screaming, it's either out of love or a cry for help. And, you have to build, and by the way, KPIs, numbers, sales calls, accountability calls, all of that stuff is a part of it, right? How many leads did you get? What was the cost? How many did you convert? Where do we lose the sale? What's your average this? Like all of that stuff, the KPIs are relatively simple, but there's always, when you peel back the onion, there's the issue behind the issue, the question behind the question, and the problem behind the problem. And like good franchise organizations that are franchisee centric, I tell our team, like, that's our job. Our job is to bear enough of the stress of the franchisee when they have it, so that we can understand and keep our relationship equity with them high enough for them to trust us to work, that we can help them. And honestly, I've had some real high corporate people that I've hired over the years, like super corporate. they might not have an appetite for that. Well, can't we just fire them? No, you just can't fire them. You can't fire them. So you gotta, so you gotta, you have to build an organization that is purpose driven enough so that, and you can't talk about franchisees negatively in the hallways. Like, that's the worst thing you could do as a leader, is hang up the phone and say, oh, Bob, he was calling again and griping or whatever, because that turns everybody's attitude sour. So, business is full contact. Any business is full contact, and it's hard enough without you making it harder. So I think franchise-centric organizations understand, the importance of being close enough to the franchisees and being staffed appropriately, not only in terms of number of people, but type of people that are going to be able to help these people when they need it. Because we want to be spoken of well, and we want to be part of their success, and we really want to help people. And then, of course, if people don't want to help themselves, there's always a way to give people a soft landing and help them get out if they shouldn't have got in or whatever. And that's really the great thing about franchising, is it's transitional. People can jump into a franchise at a relatively low cost, and then there's territory there are some limitations, but they can really in most good models do extremely well for themselves, better than they've ever done, and then sell that business, hire a manager, do what they want to do, and continue to build on that success. Because I tell people all the time, man, I kick off every training that we have in every company with a building your team segment. And success is not backwards, and it's not around, it's through. You win the next opportunity by succeeding in the one that you're in. You don't win the next opportunity by quitting the one that you're in. Like, you've got to figure it out. If it's ever been done before by anybody, then I would suggest that you can do it too. It's just a matter of fine tuning your perspective and your actions.
How do you think about franchisee profitability, or how does a good franchisee-centric franchisor, just a good franchisor, view franchisee profitability? Because franchisors can't force a franchisee to do certain things, but there might be some franchisors that are in over their head because they may not have vetted the business out enough in different markets with the right territory size, with just knowing their customer, all kinds of different things. So some franchisees may not be profitable, and that may be the franchisor's fault, or it may be the franchisee's fault because they're just not doing the things that they're supposed to do. So just in general, like, how does a good franchisor view franchisee profitability?
I think the franchisor has to bear a huge responsibility for franchisee profitability. David Barr spoke at the last IFA, and he's like, an average person on an average day giving average effort must be able to achieve predictable revenue and predictable profit. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, what does that mean? That means that you didn't sell them a jet airplane there, Tom Cruise, that you've got to fly upside down, in the Grand Canyon to make money. It's got to be something that there's enough centralized services so that the franchisee can focus on the things that need to be delivered locally and only can be delivered locally. Back when I started franchising, it was, when I first started looking at franchises, it was, here's a sales kit and a business card. Good luck, do it all. But man, technology and I don't want to sound crazy, but I think the internet's going to be very popular one day, and that we can centralize so much and create so much leverage. With AdvantaClean, we answered 250,000 inbound phone calls a year with 16 FTEs. It would have been 500 headcount out in the network. So we're big blue ocean strategists, and there's something called the value innovation, and anywhere along the value chain, at the franchisor, the franchisees, the vendors, or the customers, where there's a nickel saved, the entire value chain moves up. So I looked at it and said, well, we're not really charging enough or at all for this call center, but we're saving 484 headcount in the network, and that's going to go to somebody's bottom line, and it's going to go to their bottom line, right? But also for us, I took solace in the fact that we got data integrity, and we had, so we had the ability to handle complaints, escalate. We could de-escalate situations because they'd reach the call center if they couldn't reach the contractor, and we always picked up the phone, and we had procedures for that. We could upsell. We could. I mean, there was things that we could handle disasters, or if areas might have had a big flooding or something like that. I mean, we could staff up and we could route the calls and manage. So like there was so many advantages that we got from it, and we think from a revenue perspective and a royalty perspective. But the franchisees, I mean, think about it. They didn't have to have an office to sit people in. They didn't have to do the training and listen to what the callers were saying. They didn't have to do any of that. So, they were $100,000 better day one than a competing business because they just didn't have this overhead. And then we did it with excellence. So those are the types of things where a franchisor needs to look at their business and say, all right, what can I do to decrease the complexity of this business? Because simplicity scales. The more complex a business is, the more difficult it is, the more people get decision fatigue, or the more things that they have to do, there's more risk that a franchisee is going to default towards what they're comfortable, right? Because actually, we're all wired differently around, comfort. And we're all uncomfortable with certain things. So one of the things we do in training is, anytime that people hear something that they think isn't for them or somebody else is going to do, they make a note of that, right? Because we all want to be comfortable in, and we default to, our DNA. I've got 3 kids. How many kids you got?
3.
All
Daughters.
Identical, right?
Right.
All identical. I mean, I got, my oldest is a typical rule follower. My daughter's in the middle. She's a typical middle child. She competes upstream and downstream. And then, my youngest is going to leave this world like he came into it, which is by accident. And, they're all brilliant and they're all wonderful and beautiful in their own ways, but man, they're different. And so are we, right? So how we're born, what we like, where we went to school, what our family situation is, all of these things lay into, what our blueprint is. And so, we have to, and sometimes the older a franchisee is, or the more experience they have, the bigger curse of knowledge they have, and they have more that they need to untrain themselves. Because again, there's really one right way to run every franchise model out there. So, so from our perspective, making the business simple, making it scale, making sure that there's clarity, absolute clarity around what the roles are and what's expected, and then really inspiring and encouraging people to be great. And when you get around, you're really trying to build a culture and an environment of respect. And there's always going to be problems. So it always comes back to this. And this is the first thing I say when I meet prospective franchisees is, if you want to talk in Sandler sales parlance, an upfront contract. My upfront contract is simply, we agree to always resolve conflicts in a healthy manner. And by the way, people will come back to me, they write it down, and then when something goes wrong, like there's an oopsie somewhere, they come back and say, I was really ticked off about this, but I remember we agreed to resolve conflicts in a healthy manner. So let's talk about this.
That's some good advice for franchisors and franchisees. And I've been a part of systems that have that type of policy. And it doesn't sound like a huge deal when you hear it on the podcast. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's good. But when there's conflict, and there will be conflict at different times, if you're in this long enough, having that kind of policy is the best way to do it. You mentioned something.
I've got 3 words for your listeners around that. I'm sorry to cut you off right there, but so there's 3 simple words that that I uttered to my wife to get her to marry me. What are those 3 words? Lower your standards. Now, the 3 words that I want to tell everybody, which has changed my life. Okay. And then there's a quote I'll share is rush to conflict. Okay. I'm actually, because I'm wired the way I had been somewhat conflict averse because I want people to be happy and satisfied. But the bottom line is anytime that there's an inkling of conflict, if you rush to it, and then I couple that with this advice, it says, it's a quote, I forget who said it, but the quote is, "The person who can most accurately describe reality without laying blame shall emerge the leader." So you think about that. You've got a situation, somebody's not happy with the way something went down. You rush to conflict and you call them, right? Okay. And then you describe reality. Okay, here's what I understand that happened, Erik. We were supposed to do this. You were doing this. We didn't do this. This is what happened. So as a result of that, this happened. Is this accurate? Yeah, that's accurate. I didn't say I just said what happened. I didn't say blame. I actually didn't do that right, because I shouldn't have said you and we. I said, this is the situation, right? So without laying blame, this is the situation that happened, right? And that's where people gravitate to those people that lead. So rushing to conflict and accurately describing reality is powerful. And really, or you can let it sit overnight or sit over a weekend, and people vacillate around in their heads and they mutter in their heads about, this thing that went wrong, or you can resolve it and in a healthy manner and get to it. So those are, by the way, those take some maturity, and they take some scars to learn that, none of this is fatal. And the sooner that you address things, the sooner things get resolved, and the sooner that people move forward in a healthy manner.
Well, according to Twitter, that was Edwin Friedman.
That's exactly right.
In any situation, the person who can most accurately describe reality without laying blame will emerge as the leader, whether designated or not. I love 100%. It. I love it. You mentioned earlier, as you were just, talking about the brands that you've been a part of, and you mentioned we've had X amount sold, X amount open, and you said that in passing. A lot of times brands will say, how big is your brand? And they'll say, we have 300 sold, and then that's it. And so what do you think of brands that talk about how many they've sold versus how many they have open versus sold and open, and all of that whole discussion? Like I think it's important to talk about what's open, and not necessarily territory sold, but and you mentioned it before, franchisees, we have X amount of franchisees. So just go wherever you want with that discussion, but I like to have a little in-depth conversation around sold, open, et cetera.
Well, it's interesting because I think that's an area of excellence. And I don't remember if it was Jersey Mike's or Jimmy John's, but one of those concepts that has been wildly successful would never sell you more than one. And then you would have to open it, and then you would have to hit the KPIs and the profitability, and then they would let you have another one.
Would you ever do that now?
Shouldn't you? I mean, it's not the way it is in a lot, I mean, it's not the way it is. I mean, it's, people sell franchises like they sell McNuggets, man. You want 3, 5, or 10.
That's going to be a tweetable quote. People sell franchise like they do McNuggets.
We should,
we might cut that out, and we'll blame somebody for it.
Listen what this guy said. But and hey, guilty, right? I mean, but people come in and they have an incredible background. They got deep pockets, and they say, I'm not going to join your brand unless you give me a big area. And then you go through an extended vetting process, and you do financial verifications and backgrounds and all this stuff. And then, you give it to them. And, but we're very conservative in that way at Homefront Brands. And so one of the things that we've done is, we just don't have as many territories as, we didn't slice up the pie so that we could sell, now there's the number of required territories, but all of the territories should be able to stand alone and perform.
So here's the deal with the Franchise Tribe Mastermind. It's full of a bunch of successful franchisees across many different industries, many different brands, and you get to be a part of that. Now, if you've had any level of success in franchising, you've probably been around top performing Z's in your current brand. So think about that. And if you could do that with 40 plus different brands, industries, franchisees, that's the value in the mastermind. I bring in some of the best speakers in the world. We talk about some topics that will never be talked about anywhere else. So if you're interested in being a part of a group like that, check out franchisetribe.com. Well, we were talking about this before we actually hit record, and I think this is really important. So
sure,
franchisors, listen up to this. And just creating territory is so difficult as an emerging franchisor. Even if you have franchising experience, like where do you start creating territory? So I think this is a really important conversation and very valuable. So please share.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot more expensive than I really would have anticipated. And again, it goes back to your question of, you're building a company with resources or without resources, right? And it's like, well, it's the right thing to do. And, so you do it. But I think to your point, if it's, you also have to make the distinction, whether it's a service franchise that has contiguous territories, like a 3-pack. When we do a 3-pack or 2-pack or 2 territories for somebody, there'll be a schedule that is, in terms of, they maybe it's an accelerating royalty schedule or additional equipment or whatever it is, but they're really just opening one business at one time. If you're in a retail-based concept like Rockbox or like Beamlight Sauna, then, they have to open one, get a lease, get it going, and then they have to open the other ones. And I think there's probably more risk inside of those types of business, oil change businesses, fitness, places that have a physical location with a lease. But that's, there's people that want to own a brand or dominate a brand inside of a marketplace. So it's, I don't even know that I would say it's the franchisors that drive that as much as the franchisees, or maybe, some of the other intermediaries that operate in our business with candidates and things like that really drive up the number of units. But I mean, if everybody did it like the sandwich shop, then, you'd have a lot less problems, because you just wouldn't expand people. Because you can't, and we're incorporating a lot more pre-award screening and analysis and surveys into, we're using tools now that'll help give us an indicator whether these people are really a right fit for this or not. But still, you can't, it's very hard to judge somebody's heart and their energy and their need. Most entrepreneurs, by the way, are screwed into existence. You lost a job. I mean, this window concept that we work with, that we acquired. The founder he went deaf, and he lost his job as a result of going deaf. And, when you go deaf, you're the last person that knows it, by the way. You just realize that you're not communicating well with people and things like that. So he lost his job, couldn't get another job. He had a young family. They were going through all kinds of stuff. And so he just started washing windows back in 2005 because he needed income, and he started in his neighborhood. And next thing you know, he's got, $1 million AUVs across 13 owners. And he's been franchising since 2013, but he just didn't have the oomph to get it where it needed to go. But so we worked with him, and we had to rebrand it because it was very notorious business around here, very well respected, but it was called Labor Pains. And I just, I said, how does Window Hero sound for you guys? And, that was the first thing we had to do after we acquired the business. We had to go to their, annual convention, and they happened to be drinking beer and doing axe throwing. And then I had to tell them at that same time that we were changing the name of their company to Window Hero. But you know what? After about 2 hours of debate and whatever, they came back in the next day, and they had fashioned capes out of their bed sheets, and they were all on board with it. And it was a testament, because this guy's an incredible leader, and they trust him, and they have incredible relationship equity. So, and we just moved forward with it. We migrated them to a brand new platform, and they love it, and every single one of them validates, and every single one of them's doing great. So, but I think, I don't know how we got on this, but anyway, getting back to it. I mean, I think I think you have to be careful chasing upfront fees, because it might feel good when you close the deal and it's a nice post on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever you want to do it. But down the road, if it's not working out, now you got a lot to work out there, and you got things that you have to close, and it's, so there's definitely a balance. I mean, you want to attract, here's the way I look at balance sheets. So I look at a franchise network as kind of a cityscape. You got some tall buildings, you got some short buildings, and you got and those, it's like an iceberg. What you see above is, there's more below. So people that have heavy balance sheets and can withstand a lot in their business, and make sure that they can maintain their advertising and all of that kind of stuff, invest in trucks, people, take advantage of opportunities. I mean, they're deep, they got balance sheets, but you're gonna have some people that qualify, but they're just not that deep. And if they get in a little bit of trouble, they're gonna start chinching on their advertising or something else that matters, and all that. So you really want to build. So when you have the people that come in and say, you know what, I want to build a bigger business, and you're looking at a guy in the eye that's been able to somehow cobble together 10 million bucks. Well, you want that guy. I mean, you want them in the system. You want them to bring their time, their energy, their talents, all of that stuff right into the system. And so you make judgments, you make value judgments that what's in the best interest of the system, because as long as we do what's best interest of the system, and what's in the best interest of the franchisees, at the end of the day, it'll all be okay. And if it's not okay, then it's not the end.
Let's talk about risk. You mentioned it earlier. In a retail concept, you said there's more risk or something like that. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And I did a post in the Secrets Facebook group about risk to get different people's perspective of it. In my mind, retail concepts are just riskier, period. And there's a lot of risk that some people don't think about in retail concepts. And then you've got service-based concepts that have less risk. And I think one of the things that people don't think about, if things don't go as planned, life happens, something interrupts your life where you're not able to continue to run the business as you wanted to, or it's not as profitable as you want. If it's retail, it's not easy to sell that to another franchisee or for a franchisor to take that over. But it's in a small service-based business, or less expensive, lower startup costs. It seems to me that it's easier to let a neighboring franchisee take that over, and they're not going to lose as much money. They might even make money on that. So can you just in closing comments talk about risk on service-based versus retail, because you've been in both and you see both?
Yeah, I'm not sure what to add to that. I mean, I think you kind of nailed it. When you get into a lease situation and an upfit situation, then obviously you're going to be, it's a lot more money invested than a truck and a paintbrush or things like that, or something to spray mosquitoes or whatever it is. So you're more you've got to make sure your standstill cost, if nothing's happening, if sales went to zero, what does it cost you that month? And sales never go to zero, but they do vacillate up and down. So, you have a little less sensitivity inside of a retail concept because you just have a higher fixed cost monthly, and I think that comes into risk. Now, the other side of it is in a retail concept, the great news is that you're dealing with customers on your turf. You're in a service business. You're going into people's homes, and you're on their turf, and so there's different elements to it. Plus, in a retail service concept, you got people taking your trucks, driving all over the place. You're out there on the road, you're climbing up on ladders. I mean, there's different risks inside of each of the businesses. So you could sort them from injury to theft to, you're sending people into people's homes. I mean, things could disappear. You've got to deal with those. So every business has its risk. And risk management or risk reduction is really part of every single business. It's one of the big three things that you need to pay attention to. So Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything other than add
What are
to
the
that.
other two things?
You know what, I was thinking, you were going to ask me.
Anytime you throw out a number randomly, every time
Yeah.
I do that, I'm on a video, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, I shouldn't have said this number, because I always end up missing one or add another.
Yeah, I thought about it before you said that, and I'm like, what were those other two? I don't want to get them. I don't want to get them wrong.
We'll save that for another day. Like, we'll keep the
Yeah.
audience guessing on that.
Yeah, I mean, every business is like, it's basically sales. It's sales, it's operations, and it's risk.
I don't think risk is talked about enough. And I think if franchisees understand that and kind of have risk mitigation, risk reduction, just having that conversation and thinking through it through that lens, it'll probably be more happy, successful franchisees buying some of these brands than people that are running from something that they are afraid of. And so anyway, I thought that was a helpful conversation. I've never had that conversation, so I appreciate you going there with me.
Yeah, it was no problem. It was a McKinsey guy that said that to me. So I can't afford McKinsey. So that's why I don't remember the other two things.
So tell the audience about McKinsey, because in case they didn't know about Family Office, they don't know about McKinsey, they should know about both. So just do a quick little McKinsey commercial.
I think McKinsey is one of the leading business consultancies in the world. They have ex-entrepreneurs in residence from every industry, and anytime that there's a huge strategic shift in a brand, or many times, they're going to be the ones that the company calls in, says, evaluate this space. The guy that I knew that was a McKinsey entrepreneur in residence, they would say, they would go to a company, and a company would say, we want to be in the semiconductor space, and we're going to give you $100 million to either go out and buy, build, or stand up a semiconductor plant here, there, or anywhere else there. So that's what they do. They're big, big business consultants, and they pretty well respected, and they have an incredible research thing. So I bounced across them a couple times doing deals where they were engaged with either the company we were going to merge or be acquired by, or whatever it was, and they've always come in with a 6-inch deck of research. And it's funny when when I was selling AdvantaClean, man, one of the management meetings we were in, these guys came in with a deck. They knew more about our industry than I did. It was incredible, and they didn't even end up buying it, but they know it. So I think if there's any closing advice to the emerging brands out there is, keep your stuff in order. Be smart. Stay organized. Make sure you have all your records, your item 23s, your FTD receipts, all your conversation notes with franchisees and everything, and just make sure that the back office is you're investing in your back office to keep up with what the sales that are happening in the front of the house.
Again, emerging brands, he said it quickly just because it's second nature to him, but just go back and listen to the handful of things he said to pay attention to, do some research on it, because it's extremely important. That's how you get higher valuations on your franchise when you do go to sell it, and you have happy, successful franchisees when you are at the helm. Jeff, thanks for coming on. I love what you're doing at Homefront Brands. The audience should check out Homefront Brands. We've got a number of different franchises in there, some ones that you probably never heard of, which I love, looking at different industries. Tell them about the repair, restoration type stuff, if you don't mind, real quick, Jeff.
Yeah, so we've got the Designery, which is we rebranded from A1 Kitchen and Bath. They have 2 corporate locations and 2 franchise locations that are just opening up right there. And so we've re-engineered the space down from about 4,000 square feet. We hired the preeminent design firm, actually out of Canada, that's done major stuff all over the world, and they created kind of like an Apple store looking 1,200 tight square feet. So if somebody comes in, it's very hard right now to get somebody, you want to remodel something, it's like actually hard to get somebody to give you a good design and give you good value. So that's what the Designery is. It's kitchens, bath, and closets, and we flat pack cabinets and things like that. So it's a great offering there. And then we've got a fence company that is really doing great things around the Southeast. Pretty much the equivalent of about 23 territories, but about 9 different business units. And so we're going to be rolling them onto the franchise program, and then we'll be expanding them. And we've already got accounts with all the big box retailers, and they really just want to expand them into all of their different locations. So we got a lot of national accounts kicking up there, and those two kind of go together. If you look at the characteristics of there's inventory, there's some craftsmanship required in these businesses. They're big ticket item sales. They're one-time customers. So those two businesses kind of go together. And then if you look at our Window Hero and our Mosquito concept, those go together, right? Recurring revenue, small ticket items, very similar customer demographics in terms of that. So, we're trying to pair things up so that people that want to build an empire in franchising, they don't have to drive 3 hours territory to territory. They can just layer our concepts that go together and have one simple system on the back end where, so it's not two people to run these businesses on the back end. It's, person and a quarter or person and a half. So, and then, of course, would deliver all the great business intelligence to them so they can run their business with knowledge, with the lights on.
Well, man, we didn't even get into some of the stuff that I wanted to get into, like franchisees buying multiple brands and why they do that, why they buy them in certain families, why buy them with a family of brands like what you have over at Homefront Brands. Like, we should probably do another show at some point because you're just such an amazing communicator with the experience to back it up. So let's not wait so long before we do our next one.
Anytime. I truly exist to serve by encouraging entrepreneurs. So anytime that I'm on a show and I get to talk about things that might help people anywhere, then my light switch is on and I am on purpose. So I'm honored and thankful for the time to be able to do this today. It gives me energy to go out and do the rest of the things that I love to do.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.